Meet Connor, the McAllister's very own Sheldon. Now, before anyone panics, that doesn't mean he's a carbon copy of Sheldon Cooper, because no one could ever fully replicate that level of genius mixed with chaos. But what makes Connor interesting is how he fills a similar emotional and narrative role within Georgie and Mandy's first marriage, especially now that the show is expanding the McAllister family dynamic. In many ways, Connor has unexpectedly become the quiet anchor in a family that tends to operate at a pretty loud volume. If you look closely, Connor has stepped into the kind of space Sheldon used to occupy in young Sheldon, that character who isn't necessarily the funniest or the most dramatic, but who ends up being the observer. He's the person who sees the inconsistencies in everyone else's behavior. He's the one who unintentionally calls out hypocrisy, awkwardly exposes tensions, and asks the questions everyone else is too polite to bring up. That's the exact energy Sheldon brought to the Cooper household, even when he didn't realize he was doing it. Connor mirrors that, but with a softer touch and a much more grounded personality. Another thing that really cements Connor as the McAllister Sheldon is the way the family reacts to him. Much like how the Coopers often shape themselves around Sheldon's quirks, the McAllisters do something similar with Connor, not because he's difficult, but because he's the calmest member of the group. Their chaos bounces off him, and his reactions often highlight just how exaggerated everyone else can be. When he's confused, the audience feels it. When he's overwhelmed, we understand why. And when he quietly pushes back, it lands stronger than any shouting match ever could. But here's what really makes Connor stand out. He's the emotional compass in moments where the McAllisters drift too far into comedy or conflict. Sheldon, for all his quirks, was always the character who forced others to examine themselves, sometimes unintentionally, and Connor does the same. His presence, especially around Mandy, highlights how much pressure she's under trying to navigate her parents, her career, and her relationship. Around Georgie, Connor becomes this subtle reminder of the responsibility Georgie carries now as a young husband and father. Connor doesn't lecture, he doesn't judge. He just exists in a way that makes everyone around him a little more honest. And honestly, that's why fans are starting to gravitate toward him. He's the emotional grounding device of the McAllister side of the story. He brings out truths that might otherwise be buried under the humor or drama. Characters like Connor are the ones who end up having the most unexpected long-term impact, not because they dominate a scene, but because they quietly shape the tone of the relationships around them. The interesting thing moving forward is how the show might deepen Connor's role. If First Marriage follows the classic storytelling pattern that young Sheldon also leaned on, it's likely Connor will eventually get his own spotlight episode where we see more of how he thinks, how he processes conflict, and how he fits into this newly blended, occasionally dysfunctional extended family. Getting into his head a little more could unlock entire new layers of comedy and heart, especially because he's such a sharp contrast to characters like Mandy's intense parents or Georgie's unpredictable energy. What's clear right now is that Connor is becoming a quiet fan favorite. He's relatable in a way none of the adults consistently are. He's the kid who notices more than he says. He's the voice of reason in a group that tends to act first and think later. And he gives the show something it genuinely needs, a way to balance big moments with small, meaningful ones. So yes, calling Connor the McAllister's version of Sheldon isn't about comparing intelligence or personality. It's about understanding the role he plays in the storytelling, how he shapes the emotional rhythm of the show, and how he subtly highlights the strengths and flaws of the people around him. And honestly, First Marriage is better for it.